Cool. Okay, so now the first participants are joining. A very warm welcome from all of us. Thank you for joining today. And I always love if you participants write into the chat function, where you're joining from. I always get a kick out of that because it's really amazing how international and widespread we are here on these webinars. And I think, Zoom makes it possible. So from Detroit, for example, Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy. Thank you for joining. Today, Raleigh, Anita. It's a little bit more quiet today in terms of, Columbus, Ohio, Scotland.
Wow.
Love that. Wilmington, North Carolina. Hi, good to have you, Megan. Pasquale from Philadelphia. This is always really cool. It's the first 30 seconds always a little weird because you can't really start with the introduction because not everyone is on yet. And I love to kind of have this welcome round. This is really cool. So I suggest we wait another 20 seconds and then Renee from Toronto, Atlanta, obviously. Sasha, I haven't found anyone from New York yet.
Where are the New Yorkers at?
Well, they all moved south, I guess. Dallas. Oh, Jacqueline from New York. Well, finally, Scott from Los Angeles, Miami. Okay, good. We have some New Yorkers here. That makes me happy. Good. So I suggest we start. Today is, the Business Success Skill webinar about licensing and all about you want to know and all about, kind of helpful tips and tricks and so on and so forth. And I'm really impressed by all the participants today. Thank you for joining. This is a monthly series of Business Success Skill webinars, and you can find us on YouTube. You can find also the link on my Instagram account, which is Benni_Frowein. There you see a link to all past sessions. Really, really helpful about how to find a new client, pricing, social media, how do you get published and so on and so forth, and always with a business angle. So today we are discussing licensing deals from a business angle. And I'm really excited because I have 3 exceptional people and creatives and masterminds here with me that all have a lot of experience in this field. And I would love to introduce them before we jump into the questions. So we prepared a little presentation with pictures of them. And I would love to start with Michel. Michel Boyd is an American interior designer and part of the Bravo show Buying It Blind. His Atlanta-based firm, Michel Boyd Interiors, is known for its distinctive, cultivated, and soulful vibe. Michel's work has received countless accolades, including being recognized as one of the top 20 African-American designers in the country. Michel's business focus includes residential and commercial interior design, as well as bespoke collections of luxe rugs, artisan case goods, bold lustrous paintings, and a new collection of fragrances curated for home. And if you haven't done so, check out his website. You'll also see beautiful rugs there that you can buy. It's a pleasure to kind of explore Michel's website. So Michel, thank you for joining today. I can't wait to hear everything you have to say.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Then Thomas Pheasant is internationally recognized for his 30 years of creating interiors. His diverse accomplishments have been widely published in the most prestigious architectural and interior design magazines pretty much around the world. In 2005, he was honored by Architectural Digest US with the distinction Dean of American Design. Based in Washington, D.C., he continues to work on residential and commercial projects throughout the United States, Europe, and Asia. Along with his interior design firm, Thomas has also designed his own collection for Maguire and Baker Furniture. And Thomas, you just told us that you were last week at High Point and how amazing it was to just reconnect with the community. So thank you for joining today. Also, with you, I can't wait what you're going to have to share with us.
Great. It's great to be here.
And then normally, Sasha, it's ladies first, so I apologize. Sasha Bikoff is known for her bold and colorful maximalist work. Because international style is heavily influenced by the multicultural flair of her hometown, New York City, and from her frequent travels to Paris, Marrakesh, and Milan. Sasha studied fine arts and art history at George Washington University and the American University in Paris, beginning her career at a world-renowned art gallery before establishing her own interior design firm, Sasha Bikoff Interior Design. Sasha has a collection of carpets with her disco dots and zodiac designs, as well as a fabric and wallpaper collection with Fabric Cut and Vervan, a mosaic tile collection with New Ravenna, and a lighting collection with Kari and Company. Sasha, lots of, and I love that staircase from the Kips Bay Show House. Lots of, license deals you have. So I'm really excited also to learn from you all the tips and tricks you have for us. So thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Well, and then last but not least, also to quickly introduce myself, I'm Benni Frowein. I'm Schumacher's CEO for Europe and the Middle East. And, I've been hosting these webinars for over a year now, and I'm just really, really excited about diving in all these different topics that interior designers face at some point in their career. Because I also learned on one of the webinars that actually interior designers only work 20% on designing and 80% on just running the business, building the business, finding new clients, and a lot of admin stuff. So, I suggest we just dive in. Everyone who has questions in the audience, please use the Q&A button and pose your questions. Very happy to weave your questions into the conversation. The more questions, the better. So let's start. And Sasha, since you were last time, you're going to be first this time. I would love to learn from you, how each of your product collaborations came about. Was it organic? Did you actively pursue the partnership? Kind of, how did you get there? Because I think a lot of people that are listening are also wondering, how would I ever get there?
Mm-hmm. So originally, I had a lot of brands interested in working with me and collaborating with me. And it was a lot to handle, like running a full-time business and having to collaborate with these companies. So in the long run, I ended up working with licensing agents. And the reason why I did so is because I don't want to end up like Halston. No, but you have to be careful with the brands you work with. You want to have a wonderful marriage and relationship with them. You want to make sure that they're carrying out your designs to the way that you envision them. And you want to make sure that they're going to be able to push your product and market it and do the PR behind it. And I always say that I would never create something that I wouldn't buy myself. And everything I create with all my licensing are things that I want, but I just can't find out there. So, always in my mind, fabric and wallpaper was something I really wanted to do, and lighting and carpets, these are all things that I love in interior design. And so my licensing agents really went after certain brands and negotiated terms with brands that reached out to me, and they look after me in that sense. And there's been plenty of companies that I've was interested in working with, but the terms didn't work out well, or they weren't able to design what I wanted to create. So I had to step away from that deal. But I think that, as a designer, we have so much going on, and our clients take up so much of our time, that it's really important to have kind of a professional almost spearhead the process of licensing a lot of times.
Thank you. Super interesting. Thomas, how did it all start with you? How did your collaborations came about? Was it organic?
Well, I think what's important is Sasha has her experience, and Michel, I'm sure, has his, and I have mine. I'm older than these guys, so when I first got my first offer, it came from Baker, and it was in 2002. And honestly, when they called me, I said no. And and they were like, "What do you mean no?" And it was just, I was sort of focused. I was really focused on my interiors business. It was going well. It was a small firm. It is a small firm, and I felt really in control and I really felt like I was establishing my voice. And I was a little skeptical of joining a large company as a small entity and being kind of overwhelmed and not in control of the product. So they did, to make this a short story, I went to Chicago, met with the owners of Baker, and I was so impressed. And I actually went back to my studio. I didn't say yes, but I went back to my studio and I invited them to come to my office in Georgetown in 2 weeks, and they did. And when they walked in the office, my whole conference room was covered in hand sketches that I did. And they walked in and they were like, well, what's this? I said, if you can go this direction, I'll try it. So, and that's literally how it started. And when it's funny, here we are 20 years later, and I'm working now on a new collection for Baker, which will be launching fall of 22. And if you had told me in 2002 that I'd be, with the Baker company doing this, I would never have believed it. I was just kind of anxious to get through this first collection and see what happens. But I think what's important, and that's luck, right? I mean, I merited it on my work, but the situation, I feel like there's, it takes talent and all of that stuff and smarts, but luck and opportunity are really key. But when I talk to people who ask me about licensing, one of the things that's really important is what Sasha was touched on, is being true to yourself. And if you're going to have longevity in this field, whether you're doing product or interiors or whatever you're doing, it's really great that you build a platform that you can live with and you can evolve. And there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of insecurity. Any of us, I just really feel that, I'm comfortable as a designer and I'm comfortable with who I am, but I've got insecurities like all of us. You're putting yourself, I just did this McGuire collection, and you're anxious because you're putting it out there and you're waiting for approval. Yep. You want sales, but you're waiting for that approval. And we all have that. I think it's part of the drive that we have. And if we're on, and I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's beautiful that you have something that self-propels you to do better. So I think when you look at product or licensing, think of those steps that'll get you where you want to go, and companies that are like-minded, not a company that wants to railroad you to do something you're not exactly comfortable with.
Yeah,
so
thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Thomas. Michel, how did it all come about with you? With your licensing deals.
Okay, so I think whenever each of us is last, it's going to be like everything they said.
Right.
It's so much of what they said. My story sounds more like Sasha's than Thomas's, but just to piggyback on what you said, I think leaning into that vulnerability that you just described is the thing that sets us apart from everyone else, right? That's the authentic self that these companies want. They want our points of view. And the more we lean into that uncomfortable acceptance that we're dying for on the other side of these sketches, I think the more successful, honestly, the collection is, because the more honest it is and the clearer point of view of yours it is. I've been lucky enough that most of the companies have approached me. And I was having this conversation with my mom last night that I need to take a more proactive approach. While I'm always grateful for someone reaching out, everything doesn't work out, like Sasha said, whether it's the terms or even if it's their vision isn't aligned with the one that I have for myself, going forward. I want to be able to have this conversation in 20 years and still be proud of the work, like Thomas. So yeah, it's, I think the more honest we are about what's really going to work for us and not getting caught up in the idea of the visibility, but more so creating an amazing body of work or a legacy of work, the better off we are.
Thank you, Michel. Maybe I can just, ask a question, just that the others haven't answered yet, and that goes a little like a step earlier. You guys have all explained, how you got to that immediate, like collaboration, but I think there's so many steps before. until a company actually even asks you, you know? And I think, you know, at least if I was listening in now, I would be like, okay, so that's great. You know, either I have a licensing agent or a company comes to me, but how actually do I get to that step? So if you had like, if you, Michelle, had like 3 tips for me, fresh, you know, or not very big interior designer, like how do I even get there?
A couple of things I know for sure is that I only ever saw myself as building a brand. I love providing design services, and I think that we're really good at it because we're great listeners. But I only ever saw myself as coming into this business and wanting to create something. And I was also vocal about that. And I think the more you share what you want and what your goals are, the more the universe kind of opens up to create that. So I was clear about my point of view, always uncompromising. I wanted to create things for other designers to use. And just like Sasha, I wanted to build things that I didn't see, you know, and also for me, you know, my story is a little bit different than the other panelists is that, you know, I'm representing a community that wasn't so visible. So, you know, it's a different point of view. And I wanted to merge that with the luxury that I'm attracted to. So, you know, I came in with these missions into the industry and, you know, now I'm in a place where I have the opportunity to express those things.
Sasha, how was that with you? Because I you know, if no one knows Sasha, you can have a license agent and no brand is interested in you, right? So how did you get to that point?
So I think that ultimately, if you are designing in a way that is unique and that is a vision where you look at a room and you're like, oh, that's a Michel Boyd. Oh, that's a Sasha Bikoff. Oh, that's a Thomas Pheasant. If you're designing in that way and not kind of in a like basic aesthetic, if you have a sense of personality and uniqueness, I think that automatically a brand is going to be attracted to you because they're going to say, oh, she's doing something different. She can whip something up for us that, you know, we can't think of. Another way to get brands to acknowledge you is to support those brands and to buy things from those brands. Like I just did a piece with Kindle, and you know, it was when things like this happen, I say the stars have aligned because Dorothy Draper is a huge inspiration to me. I'm always buying Dorothy Draper furniture, whether vintage or new from Kindle. You oftentimes see the white and black lacquered in my work. Like, so that's a brand that's going to say, oh, she has that, you know, modern Dorothy Draper vibe. I'm going to want to create a piece with her. So it's almost like you have, and then for instance, with Curry and Company, my collaboration with them, I presented to them like 90 sketches of different lights that I was interested in making, but they all kind of revolved around like nature and kind of like were inspired by antiques, which is a lot of what they do, but they just make it new. So, you know, either you have to go the extra mile and you have to say, here's what I got, let's do this together, or you have to buy things from the brand, or you have to do, you know, some spectacular work where you get noticed.
Super helpful. I think those are like super tangible three tips. Thank you. Thomas, do you have something? Because I think you also speak in front of students and so on, how to get there, right? Like, what are you 1 or 2 tips to get there, you know, to that point where you even matter, you know?
Right. I you know, it's getting back to that ideas, you know, quite honestly, it's about establishing your vocabulary and your direction. And what Sasha just said is actually true. You know, sometimes in doing so, you got to get your work out there somehow. And you will work with manufacturers or companies that you like and start establishing those personal relationships. Because the other thing that's interesting, I mean, the world gets very small very quick. So if you do have a point of view, and if you do have good ideas, making those connections, I mean, there's nothing wrong with making a connection and getting turned down. So, you know, you may, you know, because you learn a little about yourself and you learn a little bit about the company. And, you know, you don't, as an outsider doing a license agreement, you know, you don't have an intimate relationship with that company, so you don't really know their dynamics. And I think that speaks to, when I get a new client, when somebody calls me about an interior, one of the questions I always ask is why, what is it about my work that propelled you to call me? Now, that's a very good question, because it tells me if these people get what I do, and that's going to be already, so we're going to start on the same platform, or am I just a name that's on a list and they don't really know what I do? So I think that connecting to companies and trying to get in that way is a great thing. And I think it's fast. Sometimes things come fast, but sometimes they don't. But I think you just have to pace yourself, and also be very careful, like Instagram and any of these social medias. If you're going to be all over the place and somebody's trying to find out about Tom Pheasant or anyone, and they go and they check, then people check. It's amazing to me, the power of Instagram, how many people have contacted me through that. So even it's like being focused, and even taking that focus into all aspects of what you're putting out there. It will, if you have a good direction and you rise above the noise, things will come. So.
I mean, I find this, I love this conversation. And Sasha, maybe also just write a question again to you, because, what we haven't really, I think a lot of people hear the word, oh my God, licensing, but we don't really discuss, why would you even do licensing? Is that like basically your retirement plan and suddenly you have like cash pouring in, or is it more about getting your name out to build a brand and to get more interior design projects? Or is it kind of a vanity thing, or is it a creative outlet? Like, what is for you the goal of it? Because it might not be for everyone the right thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that for me, all of my collections and everything I've been doing are fairly new. So they're about 1 to 2 years old already. And a lot of things launched during the pandemic. So I think that Thomas will be able to speak better on, the longevity and the success of a licensing deal. But I think that for me, I kind of looked at it like a marketing and PR tool, in the sense where I was like, you know what? I'm an American going to Milan for Salone de Mobile, and I'm doing a collection with Versace. And now I'm going to be internationally known in Europe. And I'm, now in Miami Art Basel doing my next collection for Versace. And now I'm going to, have that clout with collectible design and the art world. Or I'm an American designer and I want to be in High Point. I want to be like Martha Stewart. You know what I mean? I'm going to have my name all over High Point. And I think that the more you do, the more your name gets out there. And for me, my bread and butter, my main business is my interior. It was my firm, is my work that I do for my clients. But my passion is really designing furniture. I love to sit and sketch with my colored pencils and my eraser. And I love researching vintage and antiques. I love, I look at a tree and I see a floor lamp, and that's my passion. I love doing that. And then you see these things come to life. And last year was the first year that I was in High Point, and I just fell in love with the hustle and bustle of selling things off the floor and talking to the people and being in America. I loved it, you know what I mean? And I just think that what Michel said, it's I look at myself not just as an interior design firm, but I look at it as a brand as a whole. So I want to be able to do everything. And, it's not just licensing with furniture brands that I want to do it. I would love to design, an Absolute vodka bottle. I would love to design an espresso machine. You know what I mean? I would love to design something for Evian too. So it goes it goes beyond just our small insular interior design world. We're designers in general,
But I mean, listening to you, it's very interesting, because listening to you, I think the two really clear things, it's the building the brand, but also that it's really for you a creative outlet in which you can express yourself. Michel, is that very similar to you, or is it totally different?
100%. It's so similar, just because I was feeling that we're one of the only industries that are not allowed to venture outside. We stay in this little box. Tennis players sell us water and workout clothes, and they design fashion lines, and singers design furniture. Actresses promote furniture companies. And I'm like, how did that happen? And how is it that us, we who do this for a living are relegated to this box? It's the most interesting thing to me. So I'm 100% on board with Sasha. I mean, design affects everything. And the idea and the opportunity, because that's exactly what it is, an opportunity to have an outlet to design something solely from here, is how I keep going, because there's so many parameters, surrounding a client project, that I don't have control over. I'm designing inside of this little vacuum, and I get a chance to really spread my wings when I'm designing for my own collections or representing a brand much bigger than me. So it's an amazing opportunity to keep going, like kind of be like a forever student, and steadily building my design repertoire and just what I'm versed in, especially the research part of it. I mean, every great design is based in a reference. And even if it is a tree that becomes a floor lamp, you know what I mean? We're that way. And I love that about I think that's my favorite thing about licensing. And regarding retirement plan and getting rich, listen, there's going to be a lot of collections that you need in order to reach rich, but definitely, the extra income is cool, and to be able to create a different stream of revenue in addition to providing service is always awesome. But the work involved, I think a lot of us before getting into it are really naive about. There's a lot of work that goes into this, a lot of approval, a lot of vulnerability, and from 90 sketches, if 8 make the cut, you know what I mean?
And I think also, Michelle, you said it in a very nice way. You need a lot of collaborations in order to pay for retirement. It's also not like you can hire right away 3 people and they are financed through this. Like you need many years in that field. I mean, Sasha, you said so nicely. Thomas is probably the longest experience in that. Thomas, so hands down, is this something one does for the money, or is it really at the end of the day more like a creative outlet, or can it be both, or what would be your assessment?
Well, I think it can be both, but you can't go into it thinking you're going to make a bundle, right? Because there's a lot of things, there are a lot of realities, right? Number one, if a licensing agreement is based on a percentage, it's negotiated, and so for you, you're at the bottom of that totem pole, at the bottom of that listing of costs and profit. And so if you're going to get your little percentage, you've got to sell a heck of a lot of that product, right? So that tells you that, okay, well, if you go with a little boutique company, and I love little boutique companies, you might be able to create some really fantastic things, but maybe the numbers won't be big. But your creative is big, and the impact of what you're doing gives you clarity and gives in terms of your brand. That's very valuable. You may not receive a lot of money, but you're moving up your ladder, right? But you can be, there are some strong furniture companies that, it's interesting when you're doing a collection for a furniture company, and this is very good advice. You have to you have to think what, and for me, who's like, I'm into neutrals, I'm tailored, I'm classical in my direction. Okay, that's all wonderful, but you know what? There's a boatload of designers standing behind me who can say the same thing, right? It's the way it is. But so if you're going to do a collection that appeals to a lot of people, now we're talking about dollars, right? You want to sell a lot of products. So you have to be connectable, all right? So you have to be able that somebody who could care less who Tom Pheasant is says, I like that sofa, so I like that chair. So what I've done I'm gonna give my little secrets away here, but what I do in my little collection is I think about that, right? I put on my business head. I have my creative always, but listen, so I look at the collection, for instance, if I'm doing, let's say 40 pieces for Baker, I'll look at the body of the piece and say, okay, what's sellable, likable, approachable, but different, right? So what makes it a little bit different? And that's where your creative skill comes in on scale and, you know, knowing how things sit. But then the collection needs something that's stellar. It needs that piece that the editors are going to cling on to, and that gives you that notice, right? Also creatively, it gives you like a little iconic oomph. So it's sort of like, you know, it's not about just, you know, coming up with a lot of ideas. It's like there's got to be a strategy to it, and you got to work it out for yourself. But you know, creative is one thing, making money is another thing, you know, and so it's not easy, right? But it's wonderful. And, you know, you go into it with open eyes, and you know what, you put in the time and you learn about yourself, you learn about how this works, and hopefully you just get better, about that part of the business.
But it's interesting, you know, and obviously, I mean, I have, you know, I keep the let's say personal Schumacher perspective out of this, but you know, I can only underline that, you know, if you go to a company, you need your own. Those companies normally have their own design team, and they have their own brand that they need to push and want to push, you know. So you really need to come with your own perspective and or a story or something like that, you know. It's you know, so I got a couple of questions, and I thought, you know, why not ask them now. Elaine asks, you know, whether there is still a big demand for licensed collections. I don't know, Sasha, you're nodding. Do you want to go first?
I think that it's definitely the trend right now. I think that like designers are almost like celebrities now. I think that people are such fans of designers and follow their work. So I think that brands are really picking up on that. And, you know, you may not be able to hire the designer, but you can like get the look with the furniture. So I think that it's super hot right now. And I love it. I think it's great because I think that if you're like, you know, there's amazing designers that work at these companies, but I think that, you know, when you're working with like a known interior designer that has such an aesthetic, you know, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that look and feel if you don't hire a designer to do a collection. So I definitely think now is everyone's moment to get on the bandwagon.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting also, just like, you know, coming back to the dollar thing, Thomas, because that's actually, I forgot asking you that question too. From what I heard between the lines is that you say, well, in the long run, you can make money with it. If in the short run, you want to do money, rather find your next interior design project. It might be more lucrative. Is that kind of the...
Well, well, again, it's, you know, we all, like the three of us on this panel, we're individuals and we have, you know, our own little worlds that we've created. So there's that's the nice thing about our industry, is it's broad. But I think, you know, one thing that's a reality is, and this is a cultural change that I've seen in the 20 years. When collections came out 20 years ago, they lived on the shelf for quite a while. Now, you know, you put it out. I mean, I literally had an editor ask me during the presentation of a new collection, what's new? Like after what's new? And I'm like, this is new, right? So it's like, because it's like, we're all like, they're like locusts. It's like hungry for the next thing. Mm-hmm. So, you know, things change. And the other thing about the licensing is companies, while they may love you and you may love them, they're looking at their bottom line. So if you're doing products that's, you know, flying off the shelf, then everything's great. But you could also do some creative things that are good design, that don't really fly off the shelf and they just kind of go to sleep. So it's like, you know, you have to understand that, and now when I talk about cultural change, things are happening faster. So yes, and I agree with Sasha, it is a design, or people like designer names. I mean, that's in every aspect of what we do. It's an important thing. But there is a lot of it, but it is like when you go to High Point, I don't know how many showrooms are having openings of new collections, and they do it twice a year.
Yeah.
So how are you getting that editor? How are you getting El Decor or AD or whatever just to give you a page when they've got all these people talking in their ears?
Yeah.
So, you got to just be true. That's why being true to yourself is important, because it isn't easy, but it's great. At the same time, it's great, but you got to be tough.
But it's also interesting because the cadence has increased, of how often we launch collections every single month, for example, and there's just this constant, movement. Michel, Anita in the audience asked, how much input does the company have on the designs you present? So in that whole process, how, guide us through this. Is this all yours, or is the company having a big part in it, or is it just kind of to make it commercially feasible? How does that work in your experience?
I'm sure it's different for all of us, but I'll be honest with you. I have been really lucky in that probably 95% of what I started out with makes it to fruition. But that's thinking, like Thomas said, as a business person, thinking about the actual end user while I'm sketching, and while this thing is evolving. They hired me for a reason. They want my point of view, right? But I also want it to be sellable. I mean, we can have some amazing conceptual thing that sits on the shelf and looks really good, but never make it to anyone's home, and you probably won't get another licensed collection. He's really talented, but not sellable. That doesn't work.
Right.
And so that's a big part of it, just being a great business person and understanding who that client is. Immediately when a company approaches me, I'm thinking about who their audience is, and if they're trying to broaden it, or if they want to offer something new to the people that they already have. And then I know how to approach the design that I want to offer them. It's really important to think about it from concept all the way to the end user, and not just doing something cool and different, because maybe that's not always the best idea to try to reinvent the wheel every time. It's an interesting process. I do not have 3 new people on staff to help me build, like you said earlier. So, we have creative meetings like 2 to 3 nights a week from 8 p.m. till about 11. And I work on all the brand stuff outside of the client work that I work on all day, because it's just as important to me that there's dedicated time for those things. And, there's a whole lot of things that don't make the cut because it's just too conceptual and it needs to be sellable.
I have an interesting experience with that. I guess like all of my licensing collections are very niche and not really for for everyone. But I guess at the end of the day, I don't care, because I'm trying to also bring like a new set of people and eyes to like maybe the younger generation to design, and maybe the generation like outside of our interior design world or something. Like I guess it's a constant struggle, because I know the gray lamp with the white shade is going to be 10 times more than the lamp that has neon hibiscus flowers. But like then you teach the world that you need a neon hibiscus flower lamp somewhere in the corner, and it makes such a big
That is a luxury, Sasha. That's a luxury. That's an incredible luxury.
But I think that speaks to being true to yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what's important, because that's what's going to give you longevity, and that's what's going to,
longevity. That's the word,
right? Because that's what and you know what, again, I sound like Yoda, the old guy, but it's true. It's like,
you're my mentor.
We love it.
Right. So, but you know what? No matter what, what projects you get and all the accolades and whatever, you've got to find. It's a business, right? And the business is tough, like any business. And you've got to find a way inside yourself to wake up, motivate yourself, and propel yourself to be better. Not to be resting on you did some good things and here's more of the same. But this is where you're going. And I tell you, and part of that is inspiration. So sometimes, somebody like McGuire came to me a while ago about doing another collection, and I said yes, but I said I don't have any ideas yet, but let me think about it. And I literally it sat for a year, and I went to Japan. It was my first trip. This was right before the pandemic, and I was blown away by Japan. I mean, it was just being in another culture where you are a total outsider, and just absorbing their concept of beauty and simplicity. It just elevated me, personally. So I came back and I started sketching on the plane from McGuire, and it ended up being the soul of the collection. So while it is, I do see Tom Pheasant in that collection, 100%. I know that what lifts that collection didn't happen inside my home studio, right? It didn't happen me in my Tom Pheasant head 100% of the time. I was outside of myself. I appreciated another voice. I didn't copy that voice, but I listened, right? Listen, and then translate it, absorb it. Because, I say inspiration isn't replication. It's not about seeing a beautiful French table and sketching it and reproducing it. And that's fine too. I mean, being a sort of a collector of beautiful ideas and creating like a curator, there is a world inside our industry for that, but that's different. If you want to be a creative energy and a creative force, that force has to come from inside you, and you got to feed it, because the business is tough. Criticism is tough. But you can do it, and it's probably the most rewarding aspect of the creative force, because it's coming from you. It's not dependent on the people standing next to you, right? Or the designers that you admire, or you feel, wow, look what they're doing. Right? You gotta let that go.
And I think, Thomas, I mean, you're mentioning a lot, that it's a tough business. And we got a question from Renee, actually, towards Schumacher, how does Schumacher decide on collaborations and so on? And I find that a very interesting question, because obviously a lot of people ask us, and I feel it is like a magazine, and I think we can all relate to that, because probably all of us in one capacity or the other have pitched their apartments to a magazine. And it's not about whether my work is great, whether I did a great work on my living room. It's the question is, does the magazine, represent the style? Does the magazine need something in New York? Do they need a garden? Do they need, do they want a small space? Do they want, a man behind it or a woman behind it? Is it, so there's so many different decisions behind it. And that's the same from the Schumacher perspective, like we're a global brand. So how do we have a balance from where someone comes from? What is the aesthetic balance? What is the industry balance? For example, we have, mostly moved away from taking on new interior designers and mostly do adjacent businesses, textile designers, fashion. So because there we get a really different perspective on things. So I think how I'm trying to answer that question is also, if everyone puts themselves into the company's shoes, one hears, and I'm sure you have experienced that too, also a lot of no's, just not because the work isn't great, but just because it doesn't fit into the narrative of the company you might ask. And I think that's why a no not always means, it doesn't need to be a hurtful no. I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say. We have Lynn asking a question. Maybe you guys can answer it, and maybe with ranges and so on, because it's about licensing fees and so on. So her question is, how exactly does licensing pay you? Is it a percentage of each piece sold or some other method? How does licensing compare with the interior design company for income? Which makes more, or does it vary? So obviously I don't think anyone expects you guys to open your books now, but is it I know that it's a percentage of revenue, for example, that the company does. And it's normally significantly below 10%. So that is, I don't know, something between 1% and 5%, I would say, is the norm. That's my experience. I don't know what you guys say about that. Oh, is it a hard you can refuse to answer?
No, I think that's true. I mean, what you're saying is true. That's where numbers are important. It's
Right.
like, it's all about how many, and again, that's if you're looking at it from strictly a financial reward,
Right.
So,
That's usually how it works.
But it's interesting because I think you all said a lot that money is a nice thing, but you need to bring the creative side to the table. Otherwise, there's gazillion other people lining up.
It can't solely be for money. That can't be your sole motivation. And honestly, hopefully, the hope is that the deals get bigger and bigger, right? I think my first deal was at 3%, and they, have gone up as high as 12 at this point. And hopefully they get better and with bigger companies and reaching more people. But there's definitely a lesson in humility in the process. 100%.
I think a big issue that as designers, that as we face here, are companies like CB2, West Elm, Anthropology that knock off our work rather than collaborating with us. So when we're working with like High Point brands or like D&D brands or brands that are in the trade, we're like still in this insular bubble of our trade. But then you have like the West Elms of the world that, everyone's, and the Crate and Barrels, and everyone's going into, their stores from off the street. And then you look over and there's my Disco Dot rug being sold with Crate and Barrel kids, totally knocked off my rug when I was in talks to doing something with them. And instead of just these brands, these huge brands collaborating with designers and giving them the credit they deserve, they're knocking them off. So I think that, as designers, like we have to like kind of band together and like call out these people basically, because, they're, I don't know if every designer wants to go that route and do the Target and do the CB2 or whatever, but for me, I would like to, because I would like to create affordable things for people as well. I think there's something interesting about that. But I think that the really big game players in the industry are, what they're doing is just not right. And I think that you have to be careful with that. And you have to make sure you have your lawyer, have all of your, make sure you're all set up just in case you get copied.
But it's very interesting, Sasha, because thank you. No, because someone asks, is there ever a concern about pitching your designs and needing to protect them? More relevant when contacting outside companies rather than being approached. You're talking about being knocked off and so on by someone who didn't even see, or might not even have pitched those things to. But do you think there is overall like a concern, or do you think you should just go from door to door and get your name out because that's the best opportunity you have?
You got to sign NDAs.
Yeah.
You have to make sure you sign all the paperwork that says that this design is your design and that no one can copy it. Yeah, you have to really protect yourself, because these companies can produce what you make so fast and so quick, and they all, it's become kind of a nightmare. So yeah, you definitely have to be smart about it.
I've had good experiences so far, but in the past, in the beginning, there was a company that I was dying to work with who approached me, and I showed them too much against the advice of the representation I had at the time, and I did see those things produced, and with no credit.
There you go.
Yeah, it can happen. I'm currently working with Z Gallery. We have about 30 pieces of art together, and now we have a new rug contract, and we're entertaining something else. And each time I'm nervous, I trust them at this point, but your intellectual property and creativity is very difficult to make tangible and protect. It's very difficult. It's such an interesting process.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas, you've been so long in the licensing world. Like, how do you protect, what have you experienced is the best way to protect yourself?
Well, it's hard. It's very hard. Everything they're saying is true. You kind of have to stay ahead. Because everything's ripped off. Pretty much anytime you put something out there, it can inspire something that looks like it, but it's slightly different. So it's very difficult to go after somebody for that kind of infringement. But I think for me, I think mentally, I just, you know, I just keep looking for, you know, I'm kind of putting my brain toward the future and what I'm doing. And I think what Sasha was saying about CB2 and all of these other retailers, yeah, they do a great job at curating designs that are wonderful and making them somewhere, who knows where, for like nothing. And that satisfies a great part of the market, right? But it's how do you kind of, I'm kind of now looking at those, I'm doing the reverse, I'm getting back at them. I'm looking at those magazines now, those catalogs, and I'm making sure that I'm not doing anything that kind of looks like what they're doing, so that I'm out ahead. I mean, and typically, you know, when you're doing a collection for a company, or my experience, a furniture company, it's about a 14-month profit. I mean, 14-month cycle from the start, when I start, to when it's presented. So a year, I mean, it takes over a year sometimes. And so, you know, by the time that collections come out, I'm already a year into other things and thinking about what, you know, again, thinking about what's next. But, and the thing is, if you do it, you know, if it's a well-made product, and it's, just make sure yours is the better one, right? And it's, you know, it's funny, when in 2002, I don't want to talk too much, but in 2002, when Baker was doing this thing, and like I didn't know anything about commercial product. And so they were guiding me a little bit. They said, well, we wanted to, Tom, you're a classicist, we want something that's sort of modern tradition. So I was kind of channeled. I mean, I did the design, but it wasn't like, Tom, tell us, you know, do anything you want. But I had this idea of this thing called the Constellation mirror. And it was actually, I'd seen it, it was a brooch that I had seen in Paris, and I thought this would make a great mirror. When I showed it to Baker, they went, oh yeah, well, it's going to be expensive. And, you know, we don't really sell those kinds of accessories, but I convinced them to make one for the show at High Point. Well, every editor put that mirror in their what's hot list, and it still sells 20 years later, and it's ripped off by everybody. I mean, you can buy it at Pier 1, but you know, it's like something that kind of has a life of its own way after I've let it go. And so, you know, that's.
You know, thank you for sharing these stories, because again, there's a lot to learn from. Sarah asks, Sasha, maybe that's a question for you. I have a small niche topic wallpaper line. I would like to approach artists to license their work to expand my line. Do I go to them with a licensing agreement, or should I expect them to have a licensing agreement? Who brings what to the table? What would be, do you think it's just a conversation and with someone, and then you see, or how does that work?
So like, for me, I have kind of like a licensing agreement and some things that are, you know, that I need to have and that I want to get. And then, you know, then we start the negotiation process. But the reason why I have a licensing agent is because I want them to deal with the contract, with the money, with the payment plans, with the terms and everything, so that my vision and who I am doesn't get tainted by the business side, and I could remain the creative collaborator. I think that there's a way of handling business, and you know, I think that it helps to have a lawyer or an agent or someone, you know, play bad cop or negotiator.
Absolutely.
In this situation.
I practice the same thing. We do it in the firm, and I do it on the licensing side, that I should always just represent happy, creative ideas, great stuff, never the business part of it, because you don't want to sour your clients and or even the larger companies on dealing with you because they're thinking about negotiation. When you think about me, it should only be adding value.
You know, like it's rude to talk about money. You know?
Right.
Like, it's manners.
Yeah, I mean, I have one other comment here from Christy, and I wanted to read it because I thought it was really helpful also. She says, I signed a deal last fall, and one of the points in our agreement was that while the product itself was exclusive, the design was not. So she could cross-purpose the design into other categories if that was feasible. So I thought, it's also interesting just to kind of see, when you go into an agreement, like what is exclusive, what is, what do you write over to the company, what do you keep, and so on. We have 3 minutes left, and I would love to start or to end this session. By the way, the time flew by. Thank you. You made it very, you made it fly by. I wanted to end, also with I got this question a couple of times and we touched on it at the beginning, but I think it's a very nice wrap up. How do you get above the noise of everyone else? How do you get heard by brands? How do you, how do you get there? And I think that's what most people that are listening, I think, are kind of thinking about, because it sounds so easy once you're there. And maybe you can give your 1 or 2 best tips again, just as a wrap up of like, how do you get, if you really want to do it as a designer, because again, you need to be a creative and you need to want to design, which is very different from being an interior designer. What would be your 1 or 2 tips to the audience? Thomas, do you want to start?
Well, again, there's probably a lot of answers to that, but for me, it was just proving myself as an interior designer and attracting the attention, right? So I kind of created my platform and was able to motivate negotiations based on what I could show or what I had done. So I would say, that's kind of it. I mean, it sounds like, oh, it takes more time. Well, it kind of does. For me, it did take more time, but that's how it worked for me. But, celebrity, getting, how you get your voice out there in any kind of way to get your name recognition. And there are a lot of vehicles for that. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Sasha, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Tips for rising above the noise. Everyone's going to have some kind of opinion on something you do. But again, if you stay true to your design beliefs and your aesthetic and let people talk, because at the end of the day, you're making a splash in one way or another if people are talking about it. And I'm always down for the conversation piece, whether it's positive or negative, you're doing something right. So, F them.
I like that.
So, Michel, you have the honor of the kind of wrap up tip for today's session.
Okay, 2 quick points. To reiterate a lot of what we said is, honestly, sticking to your own point of view, there's really power in being yourself, because that's really the only thing you can do that's uniquely yours. And that's the only thing that's going to stand apart from the crowd, right, is being uniquely yourself. So there's a lot of power in that. And I think that the other thing is sometimes the idea of doing these things, it sounds cool, but you need to actually put pen to paper and sketch and build some things and have some prototypes, done with your upholsterer. Really try it and see if this really is you. Do you really have a collection inside of you? Maybe you don't, and you just think you do. But I think sometimes being prepared for the opportunities is really important step that some of us skip.
Thank you. I think that was also very helpful. Thomas, Sasha, Michel, sorry. Thank you very much for taking the time and sharing so many important, interesting, and personal aspects of, how you work and how you got here. And I make sure I keep following you very closely, because I can't wait everything you're gonna create over the next years. Thank you for everyone who was listening. And if you joined late, please make sure you can watch this again on YouTube. I think you type in Business Successful Webinars and Schumacher, and it will come up. Well, we leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.